Hello and welcome to the Channel Islands User Group 21.3. This is a re-recording of the session. Thanks so much for everyone who turned up in person and online on Friday the 3rd when we held the event live. But I've been hearing that the recording itself wasn't quite that good. So what we're going to do here is going to re-record this session for your viewing pleasure. Let's take a look at the agenda for today, shall we? First of all, we're going to start ourselves off with an Alteryx community update, get all the latest and greatest from the community and show that to you. We're going to get the latest update highlights for 21.3 in terms of both designer and server. Next, we'll be taking a look at an Alteryx workflow that Matteo and the team has put together that tracks all of those designer logs. So you can see what's happening throughout all of your designer users within your organization. Very cool indeed. Next, we're going to take a look at a macro pack and have some demonstrations of those macros that we put together just for a little bit of fun and some things that we find in Alteryx we tend to do very often. So we just put these together and we're going to show you what those are as well. Next, we've got an EWG Alteryx API connectivity demonstration that Matteo is going to be running through with us. Then we're going to take a look at some IOCR, so that's Intelligent Optical Character Recognition via Nanonets in Alteryx. So I know lots of people who have got loads of data in PDF files around their organization, and that data is just locked into PDFs. And what we're going to be showing you is a way that you can use a third-party connector that we've developed in Alteryx to send that data up to Nanonets portal, and it's going to automatically parse out that data with APIs and AI controlled parsing. Very, very cool indeed. We're going to take a look at that later on. Then to finish ourselves off, we're going to look at a 5-minute tool mastery demonstration. Find out which tool we're taking a look at later on in the demonstration. So first of all, let's take a look at the community update. What's the latest news? Well, we've got a few new certifications being released. As you can see on screen here, there's some of these certifications that you may have acquired already, which are the Core, Advanced, and Expert examinations. Again, they're all free online, so just simply log into the Alteryx community with your username and password, and then you can register for one of these exams free online, multiple choice, open book, but it is such a great accreditation to have and highly sought after. So if you're using Designer, make sure you get yourself at least Core certified. Definitely recommend to try and strive for that Advanced. And if you're feeling up to it, why not try Expert as well? But we've now got visibility of these 3 new certifications that Alteryx have also released. So do you fancy becoming an Alteryx Predictive Master? Got one of those there. You also got an Automation Master, which is really quite cool, helping to utilize Alteryx as to orchestrate all of these different processes. And then you've got Alteryx Spatial Master. Very cool indeed. I know that's one that I'm personally going to try and strive towards, is getting all 3 of these myself. Okay, next up on the Alteryx update is that Alteryx has now announced the acquisition of another organization called HyperAnna. Very cool indeed. They do automated AI-driven business insights. It's all cloud-based, all software as a service. And what it provides to us and why it's going to supplement the Alteryx platform very well indeed is because it can automatically create data visualizations for you. All you simply have to do is select your target, what you want to visualize, and it's going to interpret your data, again with that AI-driven, to manipulate those visualizations to kind of show you the story that you want to see from your data, and also automatically highlight any data anomalies for your review as well, and has that inbuilt data story functionality. Really, really excited to get my hands on this one personally and see what we can do with bringing some of that data that you've got to life via HyperAnna. Next, Alteryx has also acquired another organization called Law.io. Now, Law.io is a no-code data management platform, again, all cloud-based, as Alteryx is now striving with their strategy and their roadmap to deliver all cloud-based solutions. We've got auto-cataloging and the unification of data sources across your organization. and it's AI-assisted data models as well. So what this is going to really help to do, hopefully, is some of those larger Alteryx deployments, some of those either enterprise-scale deployments of Alteryx, just taking a look at the data lineage across all of those Alteryx applications. Where's my data coming from? What are those sources? And then where am I pushing them to? And just making sure all of those sources and destinations are harmonized across the organization, and you're going to have that visibility here with Law.io, and again, AI powered as well, rather interesting. All right, next on to the 21.3 update for both designer and server. Let's see what's new for us. So here's some of the designer highlights. First of all, we've got this funky new compare workflows functionality. Just taking a screenshot here of two workflows that I pieced together just to test this out myself. And what I found was during this compare workflows screen here, I can see any tools here which are highlighted with a little hash. You see here, those are the same tools that are present on both workflow, but it's just the configuration that has changed there. However, check out this sort tool that I put in here on workflow number 2, and it's come through as a big blocked red square behind it, which means it's a brand new tool that wasn't present in the previous version. And of course, you can see the tools that remain the same are unaffected. So really, really nice and easy way to get to grips with some versions you may have in Designer. See what those differences are. Next, you've also got a recommended tool palette included with the latest version. So this can be really, really useful for new designers, primarily getting started in Alteryx Designer when they're building their workflow. This recommended tool palette here updates as you're building the workflow based upon historic Alteryx user support reports and summaries. Alteryx can see, well, if people are using these tools, they're most likely to use these tools next. And they put those tools in the recommended palette to help you get along with utilizing Alteryx a little bit more seamlessly, even more seamlessly. Next, we've got some tool container enhancements. This is one that I personally really like to see, because now rather than disabling your tool containers and that just collapsing down and having a small box, you can't really see what's in there. Instead, you have the option now to see that this tool container here that's hashed out is disabled, but I still get to see the tools within there. And I personally really like that functionality for myself. I've been using it a lot. Next, you've got this generate support file option. So this is really quite cool, because if you experience any issues or bugs with utilizing Alteryx Designer, then the best course of action is just to contact the support@alteryx.com email. However, when you do so, they're going to fire back a load of questions to help diagnose that issue, and it can be a little bit of back and forth. However, now we have the option to generate this support file, and it's going to provide some basic diagnostics back to the support team and allow them to provide you their support a lot quicker than it has been done previously. So I really like this feature being added in as well. Next, we've got the lock workflow option. If you don't want anyone else peering into your Alteryx Designer workflows, you want to keep your logic locked up, then you can go ahead and lock that workflow. Very similar to maybe password protecting an Excel workbook or something like that as well. And then finally, there is a new and improved Power BI connector with the latest version. So I know some people have been using the Power BI connector to connect some of their awesome Alteryx workflows to data visualizations made in Power BI. And why this is really, really cool is because you can kick off an Alteryx workflow, have all that data manipulation, input and transformation, and push it straight to Power BI. And by the connector, it automatically refreshes those dashboards. I know some customers have been utilizing Alteryx Designer, the connector, and also Alteryx Server to this advantage, whereby they can schedule Alteryx workflows on their Alteryx Server to can run every 5 minutes. So therefore, you get near real-time dashboards straight to your visualizations. And again, this is going to be made so much easier by the new and improved here Power BI connector. If you're on the latest version, go ahead and check that one out as well. Next, we're on to Server 21.3 update highlights. Only a couple here, but it's still noteworthy. The first of which is this improved schedule forecast performance. So in 21.1, Alteryx released a new feature for Server, which is this schedule forecast, which I've illustrated here on screen. Now, this is really cool for server clients who are trying to orchestrate the myriad of different schedules that they've got set up in their environment. Now, previously, you just have to take note when you're scheduling these workflows, making sure they're not overlapping, making making sure they're not in business critical times when people are online using the gallery. Maybe want to spread them out a little bit, having them happening in the morning before business starts, maybe happening in the evening after it closes, maybe just scheduling some things on the weekends here. But what this is going to allow you to show you is in these deeper blue sections here, that's when you've got a cluster of loads of different schedules kicking off at the same time. That might be okay, but this forecast is going to show you where those heat maps points are, and then you can even modify these schedules on the fly within this view as well. Now, previously in 21.1, this was a little slow, but Alteryx has assured us, and I've tested out myself, that 21.3 version is a lot more seamless and easy to use. So get that upgraded to get this new functionality available to you and your teams. And we've also got a new interface for collections. Again, just tidying that up and making it a lot easier to work with as well. All right, that's it for the highlights on terms of the new version. Next, what we're going to be taking a look at is a new Alteryx flow which Matteo and the team has put together that's going to track the Alteryx designer logs. Rather interesting. Now, if I flick over to Alteryx that I've got here, I've already got a workflow open, ready to go. So I'm just going to zoom out ever so slightly and give this workflow a run. Now, all we need to do here, first of all, in order to get this set up, is what we're going to do is update each one of the user's user settings. If I go to here, user settings, edit user settings whilst that's running in the background. Hope it's going to pop up in one moment. Then I can override these system settings right here and take a look at this. This is the one that I'm going to want to update, the logging directory. Now, if I put a path in here, maybe it's a network path that someone in the group can have access to, and then you can query all of these files, maybe get all of your team to put their logging files to a central repository, and then we can utilize a workflow like the one we've got set up here, whereby I'm querying all of those logs in this directory here by the directory tool. I'm then going to read them all in, and I'm going to extract all of the data from those logs, and then this is going to tell me what all of my designers in my team have been up to. Now, you can get some user report and when people utilize Alteryx server and what apps they're using, things like that, but previously it's been a little bit hard to figure out what's going on locally, what's going on in Designer, and this workflow here is going to at least give us some of that visibility. So once this is finished running, just in one moment, here we go. Let's just walk through briefly the steps included here. So I can see via this directory input, if I give it a click, then I'm going to have all of the full paths of these logging files. Here we go, they're all date time stamped. Now, if I move across here, all we've got is a batch macro. It's going to read in all of these files together, and this is the field we get out. So we've got the contents of that file. Now, what you're going to notice is that this field here is pretty much the same information that you'd get here in this log or the messages of your workflow, but it's coming through in this text file. And of course, we've got the user name themselves actually parsed out from this part here as well. Now, once we've done this, we're going to do a little bit of preparation, a little bit of joining, and then we're going to get to this log output here. Now, this is the data set that results from this workflow, so we can see exactly the user that is running a said workflow here in workflow name, where that workflow is stored, how long that workflow took to run, and the type here. We can also see the outputs from the workflow, the inputs to the workflow, how many records were in those inputs and those outputs. And this is just some stuff that we've parsed from the logs. But again, as I said, any information you get here in this log, you can parse out and you can start to formulate your own output that match the requirements that you want to see from your designers. So really, really cool workflow. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up and we're going to send it to all the attendees, everyone who's signed up to the Alteryx user group, so you can get started with doing this right away. But hopefully this has demonstrated to you a nice way that you can use Alteryx to track Alteryx. Very cool. All right, getting back to the workflow, the presentation here, excuse me, we're going to move on next to our macro pack. So we have at the continuing team having a little bit of fun putting together some macros within Alteryx, because there's a few things that we found that we did very often indeed. So, well, if we're doing these all the time, let's make some macros. That's what they're for, right? So we're just going to show you a few that we put together, and again, these are going to be available to anyone watching. So if you want to grab these, we'll make sure to share the location so you can download, play around, and even modify them yourself if you fancy. So let's get back into Alteryx. It's going to pop up this new workflow tab here. And what I've done is I've created my very own Alteryx palette up here called Continuum Macros. If you're ever interested in doing the same, just head to the options here, user settings, and then edit those user settings again. It's going to pop open this new window, and just simply navigate over to the Macros tab, and you can click on this big plus button here, give yourself a category name, and then put the path where all of your macros reside into here. Now this can be really cool if you've got a team of designer users that make use of the same macros, all of their workflows, then simply just set this macros folder up here, and then all of your team is going to have their very own Alteryx palette up here with all the macros. You can put in your own custom images like we've done here, and it is as easy as clicking, hold, and dragging that macro from the tool palette into the canvas like so as any other tool that you'd usually use. So this first macro that we put together is an ECB exchange rates macro. Now we found in a lot of our development and a lot of our use cases, we have to incorporate some sort of FX rate to do some currency conversions and things like that. It's very common for us. So therefore, what we devised was this ECB exchange rates macro, which has this lovely interface over here. You simply select your starting year, what your base currency will be. We've got all of those available options. I'm going to say, well, I'm starting with GBP, and I'm going to want to convert some of those British pounds into Australian dollars, maybe some Canadian dollars too. I can select those currencies to convert there. Now, once I've done that, I'm just going to put a browse tool onto the other side of this macro and click on to run. And what's happening in there, we can take a look in one moment, is it's going to connect to the ECB APIs based upon the configuration options or the interface options that we selected in the macro itself. Fire that up, get the data back, transform it, and present you with this output right here. So for this date, for this base currency, converting to this currency, this was the rate that you need to apply. And again, you can dynamically implement in this all of your workflows to get the data that you need. And again, it's a simply drag and drop. Very, very cool indeed. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at another tool that we've got here. It's called the header cleanse. So what I'm going to do very quickly is I'm just going to formulate a test input. All right, here we go. So I've got myself another test input here, which is simply going to show to me some dirty looking headers. So someone here has kind of input these header data. I take a peek, and it doesn't look very good. Don't know who made this file, but they didn't do a terribly good job. So what I'm going to want to do is cleanse up these headers. Now, previously, you've only been able to utilize the data cleansing tool here, and that's brilliant at cleaning all the fields and actually the records within your data set. But if you've got headers that are not in good order, then it has been a little bit troublesome, I've found. So therefore, I put together this header cleanse macro. So if I just drop it here onto the canvas, then what I'm going to do is it's presenting to me here all of the same options that you would have got in the data cleansing tool, but now this applies to the data headers you've got. So maybe I want to remove all the trading lean and white space, move the tabs and all that sort of stuff in there. I'm going to get rid of all the white space, going to get rid of all the punctuation, and even put my case to title case as well. So take a look, this is the headers coming in, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rerun this workflow, querying ECB at the same time, but we're going to get those cleansed headers coming out the other side of this header cleanse macro in just one moment. Here we go, here's the data coming in, utilizing this input node here, flick into the output. Oh God, that makes me feel a lot better. Nice, clean and tidy headers, and we can go ahead and start to utilize those in the rest of my workflow straight away as well. Very cool. Now what I'm going to do, just so we don't run these again, is I'm going to pop them in a new container and disable that like so. Take a look at that new tool container setup as well, hashed out like we've seen on the updates beforehand. Very nice. Now this final tool that we've got here is an XLSX batch input. So we found that it's very common indeed to be wanting to query a whole directory of Excel files. And that's nice and easy if you're reading from the same sheet every time, but what if you're going to read from a directory of Excel files and you want to read in all the sheets from those Excel files as well? Now, you can do that by piecing together a batch macro, but rather than doing that from scratch every single time, all we've done is compiled our very own batch macro that we can do that for as well. So all you need to do here is just navigate to the folder that contains all of those Excel files that you want to read in and read all the sheets in for as well. Pump that into here, press on to play, and you're going to get a union of all of those data fields, all those worksheets coming out here in this macro as well. Super easy to use. Now, as I said before, we're going to share these macros with you, and if you fancy taking a look how we've done it, then simply right-click on any one of the macros that we share with you and click onto Open Macro here. It's going to pop up in a new workflow, and then you can take a look under the bonnet, so to speak, and see how we've done it. And again, you can start to replicate this and start to maybe take some learnings from these macros and how we piece it together, and it might inspire you to do some cool things in your own works as well. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to hand over to Matteo, and he's going to run through the EWG API demonstration and talk to us about what it's all about.
All right, thanks for that, Ben. So yeah, I'm going to take you through a nice EWG demo. So EWG is a self-service payments and transactions banking solution platform for companies, especially with a lot of international connectivity. So this is going to allow someone to synchronize multiple bank accounts to a variety of different structures. This is mainly done through their API connectivity, but in the past we've found a lot of organizations really struggled to connect with these APIs, which is where Alteryx is going to come in and be that kind of connector between what we want and the EWG platform. It's also going to make it very easy for existing Alteryx clients to get connected instantly to EWG without already built workflows. And it's also going to mean new clients will be able to benefit from these Alteryx free trials. So, heading into our demo today, we're going to be taking, let's say you have a load of yachts around the world, and what you need to do is pay all your staff. But because they're all around the world, they're going to be in loads of different currencies. But let's say you only hold GBP. So in an example here, we've got 20 staff to pay. So what we've done is we've built what's called an Alteryx chained application, which means it's 3 different applications all sat next to each other. We're going to run the first one that we can see here. It's going to run through, do what it does, and then straight away it will fire up a second app, which we can then run and use those outputs for a third app. So I'm going to start by choosing my payroll file, which I'm going to select here, and then I can just click continue. It's going to run our first app in the background. So what this app is going to do is going to check all our balances and say, do we have enough at the moment in all of our currencies to run the current payments? And so as we can see, it's currently telling us that we're short of US dollars, euros, and Australian dollars. Then it's going to say, do we want to convert from our GBP to these amounts and give us an exchange rate? And so in this example, I'm going to say, yep, I'm happy with all of these. Make these conversions for me. And then just click continue again. So that was our second app running. And once these have gone through, we're going to be able to head into our EWG platform itself just to see that they've happened. So what we've done is we've done a conversion. And we can head down to the bottom here. Oh no, sorry, at the top here, and we can see we've made these 3 conversions, bought US dollars and sold GBP. Which leads us to our final part of the app. This is where we would actually make the payments ourselves. And so we'd be able to maybe deselect ones that we know don't need to happen, or we know need to be delayed. And so in this case, I'm just going to select our test. And I can run our final part of the app, which is going to make the payment itself. And we get up here, just a confirmation, so we can see on the 21st of this month, we're going to make a payment to our beneficiary called test in the currency GBP and just a dummy amount. So this would also be where it might tell you maybe we're missing a beneficiary and you need to go create it. You could also go and create it automatically. You've got all the options there. So finally, I'm just going to head into our payment section. When it loads, we can see at the bottom here, we've made a payment to go through on the 21st of the 12th. And so finally, we'll be able to use Alteryx's connectivity with, say, Power BI, and we can make all sorts of MI reports using the exact same connectors, pulling down balances, making whatever we need.
All right, thanks so much, Matteo, for that presentation of EWG APIs. Very cool indeed. Looking forward to working with those guys closer as we move forward. Now, here we go. We're going to take a peek at Alteryx and the use of intelligent OCR provided by Nanonets. So as we all well know, Alteryx is a phenomenal platform for getting a hold of our data and putting it into a single instance and making it malleable so we can chop, change, join and mold that data to any shape that we want. But how do we get a hold of data that's locked away in PDF files? Well, you might have already tried out utilizing the R tools within Alteryx to parse out some PDFs, converting that PDF into text, and then having bespoke workflows which deconstruct those PDFs into tabular data. And that works considering that the format of the output or the PDF that you expect them to parse is the same every single time around. But it is quite rigid. And what if that format's prone to change? What if you have loads of different formats and you just don't have the time to create a bespoke workflow for each and every one of those? Well, this is where Nanonets comes in. It's AI driven. It's already got some pre-built models which scans through a load of different types of documents, which we'll have a look at in a moment, and then it parses out that data automatically for you by auto-detecting tables and all that funky cool stuff as well. So we're going to run through what functionality it can provide to you as an Alteryx user to hopefully unlock some of that PDF data, get it into Alteryx, and then you can start to mold it as you have done with any other Alteryx data. Really cool indeed. So as I see, there's a few different models which they have built and tried and tested themselves at Nanonets. So you can have the invoices, receipts, driver licenses, passports, or even just some standard tables. And if you fancy you've got quite a bespoke or niche model that you need to build, you can create your own model there as well. That's going to be specific to the format of your PDF or your files that you're working with. So we're just going to illustrate a couple here today. The first of which I'm going to go through some slides about how we can parse out and how we can capture some passport information. Again, it's interesting for organizations who want to automate some of their KYC processes. And then we're going to take a look at parsing out some tables from a PDF portfolio evaluation that we have here as well. So here's a standard Great British Passport here, just a bit of test data. And what we've done is this isn't even an actual PDF file itself. It's just a PNG, just an image file. It doesn't even have to be a proper PDF file, but Nanonets can go through, and hopefully you can see now it's actually highlighted all of the bits of data that it's automatically going to parse out for you based upon the models it's already got in there. Very cool indeed. Now, this passport PDF extraction is not just specific to GB, it's international here. So you've got an Indian passport, one from Ukraine, and even one from Ireland as well. If I flick down to the next slide, you should hopefully pick out all of those information points or data points that we need from these passports. Really is indeed as simple as just firing out those images, firing out those PDFs, and then Nanonets does the work for you and sends that data back. Now, what we're going to take a look at is a specific example where we configured an Alteryx workflow to run based upon a UBS portfolio summary report. So if I flick over to Nanonets, what I've got here is I've got a variety of PDF reports. Here's an example of the PDF that I've got here. And I want to parse out some of these cash transactions. But my goodness, take a look. I've got 38 pages of these, and it's not really in that much of a defined tabular structure here. We don't really have any columns here. We've got multiple rows and things like that. So let's just see what Nanonets can do for us. All we need to do is configure a workflow. This calls Nanonets first of all. So here's a PDF directory of all of the PDFs that we've got within this client folder. Then I'm just simply selecting the full path of each one of those files. And then what we've done, we've compiled here at Continuum our very own Nanonets API macro. And again, if you're interested in getting started with Nanonets, and we can share this with you if you're interested in taking a look. And all that does is it fires up those files that we've got there in that directory, and it passes them to the Nanonets API, and it's going to work its magic in the cloud. Now, once it's done so, it's going to send us back an Excel file with all of the data, and this is what it looks like coming back from Nanonets. This gives us a few different files, and what we're doing here in this formatting outputs workflow is taking that output we've got from Nanonets here and then starting to do a little bit of prep with it now that it's in a Excel format. Again, it could be PDF, it could be pictures. It's managed to interpret those characters intelligently. And then what we do after a little bit of preparation in this workflow is we get to this output right here, which is going to be some for our FX rates, some for here for another table that we've got for cash transactions and so on. We've got all those balances, the sheet where it's come from, currency, and all that sort of good stuff as well. So it's a really, really nice way of just firing up that data and getting it back into Alteryx. And as you know, if you've got data in Alteryx, you can do pretty much anything you want with it after that point. So I hope that's just giving you a little bit of inspiration on how you can unlock some of that PDF data. And if you want to find out more, just let us know, and we'll be more and more happy to show you a bespoke or personalized demonstration. All right, so getting on to the last slide. This is the last part of our agenda. What I like to do is every time we have an Alteryx user group, you go away at least knowing how to use one Alteryx tool better, if nothing else. So that tool that we're going to take a look at today, it happens to be the message tool. Really cool tool indeed. I use it quite extensively, and is quite important, especially when you're utilizing or creating, much rather, Alteryx server applications. You know, as an end user, you may have a interface presented to you that's been configured by the Alteryx designer, which is going to say, hey, select some of your input files, maybe pump in a few variables and things like that, and then press go. However, if the input file, for example, doesn't match the schema or the format that you expected it to have, then it can unnecessarily cause issues for you later on down the workflow, such as, you know, missing fields or invalid type and operator and all this sort of, you know, Alteryx error messaging that you may, as a designer user, be able to interpret, but an end user in the business, if they start seeing these errors, then they're not going to be too sure what's going on. However, we can capture those error messages utilizing the message tool and then devise our very own plain English message, an error, back to the user. It's going to be a lot more descriptive for them. So let's get into how we can do that ourselves. So I'm just going to hop over into Alteryx, and I've got a tool mastery workflow set up right here, ready for us to use. So step one, as then we're going to get an Alteryx workflow that shows us here's all of our input files, and then give us an error if those input files don't match the schema that we expect. So there's a couple of steps to using this. First of all is, if I'm just going to run this workflow, we need to put in a Alteryx input that is exactly the format that we want. So these are all the fields that we're interested in. Just going to drop any fields that we may be not interested in. I'm going to take them all through in the first instance. Then I'm going to use this sample tool. Just select the first record, then give it a little bit of a transpose, and then I'm going to drop that value field. So here we go. We've just got a list of all the fields now that we're going to want to validate against. And what we can do is we can just copy all of these to clipboard. There we go. Now we've got those in our bank. We can just go down to step number 2. So if I just enable this part here, this is where we're doing the validation. So it's going to pop this open, and you can see I've devised my very own macro here. You can get creative with those and putting your faces on those if you fancy. But the way that this works is I've just pasted in those expected fields that I wanted to validate against here. That's why I did step 1. And now what I've done is I pointed this directory tool to a input full of a directory full of files I want to input to my workflow. Just going to drop all the fields I don't want because I only need the full path and the file name here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open my face here into this macro and see how we've utilized the message tool to give us this custom error message. So this is how the batch macro works. It comes in here, putting in the full path of the file that we select or we push into the macro on the workflow level. That's updating this input data tool here. Then what we do is pretty much exactly the same that we did in step 1. You remember, by just selecting that first record, transposing the data across, and then just selecting the name. And then we're left not with the fields that we expect, but with the fields that are present in the input this time around. Now, what we're going to have here is this is our expected fields input. And remember, this is the input coming here at the bottom of this macro. So whatever you paste into here is what we're going to say has to be in these input files. So what I've done is just join together the fields that we do have together with the fields that we want to see. And any fields that we don't have that we want to see are going to be coming out this right output of the join here. Next, what I've done is I've utilized this count records tool. And this is really important because, as you can probably see here, since all of the fields that we expect to validate against are in the input, I've actually produced no records out this right output. However, what makes the count records tool really special is because regardless of the number of records you put into it, it's always going to give you a value coming out the other server side. It has no records coming in. The value of the count is just 0. So therefore, we actually have some data, as you can see here, with the one record coming out, which is going to allow us to compile the message regardless of whether we match all the fields or not. Really cool. Now, considering that we do have some fields that aren't mapped up, then those names are coming on through here, and all I've done is just concatenated them together utilizing the summarize tool. Now, just be wary of these concatenate properties. I've started with a quote at the start, then I got a comma in the middle, and I ended the quote, which kind of just makes the field names that are missing a little bit more distinct in the error message for the end user. Now, what I've done is it's appending the count of the records that are missing and appending the concatenated name fields together, and then I'm just appending that to the data set itself. So if I scroll across, I'm going to see I've got the count of the fields missing and all the fields missing, should there be any. This is where we get stuck into the magic now. This is the message tool. So clicking on the message tool itself, let's go through the configuration so you can get it set up yourself. So what I said is only show a message when this condition is true, i.e. the count is not equal to 0. Remember, if that count's greater than 0, then we have some fields that we want that are missing. And then we select the message type. So, okay, if this condition is true, what do I want to show? Well, you can show just a message, you can show a warning, an error. But what I've chosen to select here in this workflow is say error and stop records passing through this tool. So therefore, I only get the records from the input files that match the scheme that I want coming out the macro, and everything else is deselected or dropped, and I'm not getting it out there. So it's not going to corrupt any of the other things I've got going on downstream. It may be some of the workflows I've got on utilizing this macro in. So there we go, just gonna select that there, and then this is where I get to create that message expression utilizing a formula. Really cool. So what I've done is I've had data validation error. There are count, i.e. the number of fields that are missing, expected fields not in your input, and then again I've referenced the file name in here so they can see specifically the file that these fields are missing from. These are, and then concat name. Now this is what I did that summarize tool before as well, because then they can see, well, I've got 5 fields, let's say, missing in file number 1, and these are XYZ going forward. So you can actually see specifically what those files fields are that you're missing. And then it simply says here, please ensure your file meets the expected format and resubmit. So rather than getting those designer errors, which may be looking a little bit complex to the end user, I said before, they're getting this error. And this is really useful when you've got non-Alteryx users interacting with applications you develop and deploy on Alteryx server, and it's going to make it so much easier for them to interact with. So let's see what happens if this does fail. I've set up a few input files here, 3 files coming on in, and I know one of them doesn't quite meet the expected format. So let's see what happens now. If I give this a run, you're going to see those 3 files coming on in. Here's the fields that I expect to see. Ah, goodness, I got an error. Here it is. Data validation error. There are 1 field not in your input, even more customers. These are zip2. Please ensure your file meets expected format and resubmit. And this is the error that they're going to get on the Alteryx server side should you utilize this message tool correctly. Really, really cool indeed, and personally a tool that I utilize a lot. So that wraps up today's Alteryx user group for this time being. We're going to be back in 21.4, probably sometime in the new year. Thanks so much if you made it all the way through. Really appreciate your time and attention, and thanks again for those people who turned up, both in person and online on Friday the 3rd when we actually held it here at the Digital Jersey Hub. We're really looking forward to the next time around. Hopefully we have some new cool demonstrations for you. But if we don't speak to you before the new year, have you a very good Christmas and a wonderful new year. We'll speak to you very soon indeed. Thanks so much. Have a great day today. Bye-bye.